This is Halloween, 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 Halloween. And it's the end of the spooky season. Goodbye, Halloween. Welcome, Christmas music.
Let one go, can't hold it in anymore.
No! God, please, no!
Today I'm doing my usual video that I do every couple of months or so, where I want to do a lot of reviews at the same time. And of course, the theme of today's video is horror films.
Yeah, it's me.
And I'm gonna give you some recommendations for the stuff that has been coming out in the last few weeks. Of course, these reviews are not gonna be only positive, because as we know as horror fans, it's really hard to please us. And at the end of the day, even when they're trying to do something original, if there is something that doesn't work within the film or within the series itself, we just go insane and we call it like the most disgusting thing ever made. This is what being a horror fan is. It's kind of divisive, you know? And that's why I decided to actually organize my videos so that I do one rant and one positive review. One rant, one positive review. Otherwise I will go insane. And we're gonna be starting with Mike Flanagan's new series, The Midnight Club. So to give you a bit of context, I love Mike Flanagan's work. I think his work goes from okay to really, really good, but it's never actually bad. And it's never actually like a waste of time. I think back about movies like Oculus, for example, that I didn't really enjoy, but I still appreciate the concept. When it comes to the series that he's been making with Netflix, there are some that I love and there are some that didn't really hit with me. I love Haunting of Hill House, for example, and I had nightmares about Haunting of Hill House for a couple of weeks after I finished that series.
You stop that.
Bly Manor didn't really hit home for me, even though I really like the characters and the story itself. Midnight Mass was a huge hit. I really loved it. And this year we've got a new one called The Midnight Club. It's the most contemporary horror series that he's made, and I think it's definitely one of his least scary at the end of the day, unless you get scared by jump scares. There is a shit ton of jump scares, but I will address that later on. The thing about Midnight Club is that it really feels like he's making his own version of a Spielberg movie, because we've got these teenagers who live in a time where the internet didn't exist, so they have to find ways to spend time together, and they decided to meet each other every single night at midnight to tell each other horror stories. And of course it's an interesting concept when you don't really experience it, because at the end of the day I felt that the stories themselves took away so much time from the main plot of the series itself that I kind of lost myself within them, and I forgot what was reality and what was fiction. It kind of reminded me of American Horror Story. This series is definitely the most episodic stuff that he's created, meaning that every single episode almost could be directed by a different person with a different style. And that's just because of what the stories inspire us, depending whether it's something that is more like a noir story, something that is more like a teenage slasher story, or something that is more like a weird story about alien or cyborgs or whatever.
Ben! You did it! Way to go, Morty!
Crossy, Biblesaurus, you made it!
We would have missed this for anything!
You said it, Mr. Celery.
What the fuck is all of this?
Greatest story ever told, Story Lord.
No, it's not! It's awful! I beg your pardon? God damn!
I feel like the stories are at the same time the best thing about this series, but also the worst thing, just because, as I said before, it really distracts you from the main plot. And I think this is why not a lot of people have been talking about the Midnight Club and saying overall positive things. I think it's because it's a very uneven, limited series. I don't think it really knows what is its main plot. It just knows what its big themes are. So we're talking about teenagers who have cancer and who are doomed to die, who are also doomed to waste a lot of their years on nothingness just because of a weird genetic anomaly. And that is the main theme of the series itself. But when it comes to the plot, there are a lot of things that are sparkled in every single episode, but at the end of the day, nothing really comes together. And now we'll have to go into spoilers, otherwise I will not be able to address all the structural problems that this series has. And let's start by talking about the occult and the ghosts. They're not really ghosts at the end of the day, right? It's not even revealed if they are ghosts or not. And this is something that I don't really like, because it really feels like Mike Flanagan is kind of like taking advantage of the horror conventions, cliches, so that the series stays interesting and entertaining and quite fast-paced as well.
I trusted you. Every single thing you told me was a lie!
You can see that by the amount of jump cuts that they use, especially in the first episode, by the amount of jump scares that come almost every single time at the end of the episode. I feel like Mike Flanagan was kind of afraid that we would just not be interested in this really small scale drama story that he wanted to tell. And I don't really see the point of actually including all of the ghosts and all of the occult at the end of the day, because they don't really head anywhere. If we want to talk specifics, for example, there is this character of Jane who is trying to heal herself from a disease, or she's trying to gain eternal youth. We don't really know at the end of the day, but basically she convinces one of the teenagers to do a rite/sacrifice with her, but actually that sacrifice lasts only a couple of minutes and she gets to escape through the elevator smiling like a weird cartoon character, and there are no consequences to her, despite the fact she literally tried to kill 3 people by sacrificing them to some weird pagan god. And that's weird. And then of course we have the final reveal, which comes at the very last few seconds of the series, where we see that the superintendent of this hospice, first of all, she's actually bald and wearing a wig, and at the back of her head she actually has the tattoo of all the other disciples that we've seen across the entire limited series. And that's how the series ends.
What was that? Okay, James.
This is what I'm talking about when it comes to kind of like teasing you things that don't really amount to anything. And the final episode is kind of like the apotheosis of that, because it's throwing a lot of smokescreen into our eyes so that we keep being distracted from the fact that this series is actually really straightforward when it comes to the themes that it wants to explore and the story that it wants to tell. And also something that I noticed towards the end of the series is that almost every single episode there is like a very forced monologue about the meaning of life, or about the meaning of death, and main characters crying or being forced to cry. It really works at the beginning of the series, especially when we don't know whether Anya is gonna die or not, but then when we get towards the end, it really feels like he's forcing all of this drama to come out, even though we know since the very first episode that all of these teenagers are doomed to die and that they have to accept it. And it's just weird to just repeat that plot line over and over again, episode after an episode after an episode. Of course, I'm making it sound like it's a really negative review, but it's not really the case. I mean, I love all the characters that are part of this series here, and I love how Mike Flanagan seems to really be interested in depression and sadness and despair, and how basically those big emotions define your life and can kind of hold you down and force you not to see like the good in your life or the good in everyone else's lives. I really like all the themes, I really liked all the performances, and I thought that the teenagers were really heartwarming when they were talking to each other, trying to connect and trying to act so much wiser than they actually are in real life.
It's just so fucking unfair. It's happening to you, it's happening to us. So, I hope you hear me when I say we're all with you in there. And we always will be.
All of those things are really good. I feel like maybe the series should have been shortened to 8 episodes, which is kind of like the norm when it comes to Mike Flanagan's shows, so I have no idea why they decided to stretch it to 10 episodes, because even the occult kind of subplot, there are not that many plot developments, so it's up to you if you want to forgive all of these structural and writing problems or not. Next, we're gonna be talking about Hellraiser, which I absolutely loved.
It's time. Greater delights await. We wish to see you proceed.
First of all, I'm not really a huge fan of Clive Barker's original movie, Hellraiser, mostly because I remember it being really strong from a visual perspective, from the concept itself, but everything else just doesn't work. The writing of that film doesn't work that well. The characters are not interesting, they're kind of despicable, so you kind of like want them to die at the end of the day, and I don't think it works really well in the movie's favor. And I haven't seen any of the other Hellraiser films, but I've heard really bad things, besides maybe for the second one. But this movie here, I really loved it, mostly because it is probably one of the goriest horror movie that I've seen in such a long time, and I literally saw The Sadness like a couple of months ago, just to give you a little bit of context.
Nice.
And I also think that it's a really good film for David Bruckner's career. He's worked on a lot of... Oh, they're starting to drill. Perfect. They're starting to drill again. Do you remember last week? Yeah, this is the same kind of drilling, but they're not outside my window at the moment, so I don't know if you can actually hear it or not. Let's try to keep going.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
I actually had to take a 5-hour break because of the construction work outside, and it was insane. I wasted so much time. But here we go, we're back into it again. I hope I can still manage to find some good mood inside this little incredibly shiny head. So, as I was saying before, I love the look of the Cenobites. I really loved also the gruesome murders and the cinematography, and I feel like they were really trying to expand the universe and dig into some cosmic horror instead of just relying on the supernatural and the basic idea of hell demons that we're accustomed to. This is without doubt David Bruckner's best movie. Everything he did in The Ritual and The Night House are done better in this movie here. I mean, maybe besides the performances of the actors, but I still really recommend it. And maybe I can channel some of that rage into completely destroying Halloween Ends, which was even worse than Halloween Kills.
Maybe the only way he can die is if I die too. It all ends now.
Oh my god, this is so awkward. Why are you doing this? Why? This is awful.
And it was something that I was not expecting at all. To be honest, do you remember Halloween Season of the Witch? Yeah, basically the Halloween movie where Michael Myers didn't do anything at all. It's the same case for Halloween Ends. There are so many incredible narrative inconsistencies when it comes to this film here, because it is acting as the end of a trilogy, that it just drove me insane. Some of the characters don't act the way they're supposed to, and when I finished the movie and I looked back on the trilogy and on this movie here, I realized that you could have literally created a link in between the very first Halloween film from '78 and this one here. Without all the other ones, it still would have worked. And that's where you know that you don't have a strong movie there, because Halloween Ends doesn't seem to factor in the two previous films at all. There are so many plot lines which are not explored anymore, and Laurie Strode is actually not even the main character, which is kind of weird. And Michael Myers is not the main character because someone else is, this guy named Corey. And even though it was definitely something fresh, because it was not really following the slasher genre conventions, it definitely still felt like a kick in the balls, because it didn't only defy expectations, it just didn't make sense at all. And one way to know whether a film is stupid or not, check whether at the beginning they give you a 2-minute montage, not only telling you the important narrative plot points from the two previous films, but literally doing like a kill montage of the best kills from the previous two films. Why? That was so weird. Do you think that we don't remember? Do you think that fans don't remember what happened in the last two films? Or do you just need more violence because the movie doesn't actually have that much at the end of the day?
So what's going on with Michael Myers? I mean, at the end of the last movie, we said he was like the embodiment of evil, and he took out a whole entire armed mob by himself. Oh yeah, yeah, well, I forgot about all that. So now he's very weak and he's been living in a sewer for 4 years.
I mean, of course, this movie made me realize how much I don't care about anyone of the people here besides Michael Myers. In the second film, they made everyone so completely despicable that I was actually rooting for Michael to kill all of them. Laurie Strode as well. And this movie is exactly the same. Actually, this movie doesn't work at all. Mostly because, well, spoiler alert, first of all, because I can't really get into details without talking about this kind of stuff. But Corey is basically trying to become the new Michael Myers. But at the end of the day, he's only punishing and killing people who actually wronged him. So people who are actually bad. So within the context of the movie, those people were labeled as bad. And Corey was actually punishing them for the way that they treated him. And the weird thing is that it's never been like that when it comes to Michael Myers. The scary thing about Michael Myers is that he could kill anyone. And the two previous films have actually tried to establish so well the idea that Michael Myers is a force of evil. It's not a character. So it means that he will try to kill everything that moves and he will not have a grudge on certain specific people. But Corey does. So it makes no sense. Even though he's being possessed by evil, he's actually at the end of the day killing only people who technically deserve it. So that was kind of weird.
This kid that was beaten up by some marching band kids beats the crap out of Michael Myers. Yeah, just whoops his little psychopath butt and steals his mask and runs away. All right.
And the thing that really doesn't work about Halloween is the fact that when it comes to its structure, kind of like tries to set up so many things and it doesn't reward you on any of them. For example, I was under the impression that this was kind of a weird reincarnation thing where Corey was becoming such an evil person that slowly and slowly the old Michael Myers would disappear and Corey would become Michael Myers. That's what I assumed. Then I realized that that's not what was happening and was actually kind of like Corey was generating evil forces that Michael Myers was kind of like eating up so that he could recover his strength so that he could basically start killing again. That's what actually happened at the end of the day. At the same time, it was kind of teasing us a weird like buddy comedy in between Michael Myers and Corey, who were like killing together and having fun. So which one of these three movies is this? Because I have no idea. Also, like for a third film in a franchise, it was kind of anticlimactic when you think about it. Of course, not to have the villain until the very last act of the movie itself. I mean, now that the trilogy is finished, I can honestly say that what I was thinking about when the first movie came out in 2018, I was actually right. There was no reason to keep Michael Myers alive. That movie was actually perfect in the way that it really used the Laurie Strode character in new and interesting ways. Kind of remind me of the Terminator Sarah Connor kind of thing. But then Halloween Kills kind of didn't do anything at all besides being a complete gore fest. The town became almost a character, a corrupted source of evil. And in this third film, there's nothing else. Laurie has kind of made her peace and she's trying to live her own life a la Scream, basically, like what Sidney Prescott has been doing for the last 10 or 15 years approximately. Michael Myers is not actually coming after her. It's someone else who's kind of rising. This feels like a perfect fourth film in a trilogy. Those kind of like Renaissance chapters that are there to revive like the franchise itself. It felt like an incredibly weird ending for a trilogy like this. And at the end of the day, even the gore and the kills didn't really save this movie for me. Just because it has said before, it didn't really feel like a slasher movie as much as a weird mix in between so many different things. And now we're gonna head into actually good horror films, and these are more kind of indie. Maybe you haven't heard about them. There is this one which is German and it came out on Netflix. It's called Old People.
Mensch oder Tier?
And I know what you're thinking. Very often when there is a topic like that in horror films, it tends to depict like older people like incredibly disgusting and weird. Think about Ty West's movie X, for example, and the sex scene, or think about the movie Old, the one made by M. Night Shyamalan. But this movie here, I really enjoyed it because it makes the old people the actual main characters of the story and they become the villains. They become the agent of the action when it comes to the story itself. And I really enjoyed it because at the end of the day, I was trying to think of who are the most iconic horror characters, and it's always quite young people, you know? So I was actually excited about that idea of finally having like a group of incredibly evil old people who seem to rise to the occasion to commit revenge because they've been ignored by their families and because they've been discarded by society. I mean, it's not really a complex movie and the performances sometimes are not really that good, but at the end of the day I felt like this was one of those horror films where the concept, the story, the gore, everything aligned itself to tell kind of a really good adventure, and I just had a really good time. And I'm quite surprised, to be honest, when it comes to international horror. It tends to be really good on Netflix. Is it controversial to consider the VHS franchise as underrated? I mean, I don't really talk about it with other people and I haven't seen a lot of really controversial opinions about it. It's made of 5 movies and 1 spin-off called Siren, and it's mainly known for giving a platform to really talented people who ended up making really good films at the end of the day, like David Bruckner, who we talked about a couple of minutes ago, people like Adam Wingard, who made Your Next and the recent Godzilla vs. Kong, people like Ty West, who this year went completely insane and made X, Pearl and Maxine back to back, or even the Radio Silence Collective, who you might know because they directed the masterpiece Ready or Not, but also the new Scream movie. In my opinion, the VHS franchise is okay and sometimes good, but it's definitely limited by its own format. I actually think that the ABCs of Death managed to have way more interesting short films quality-wise, and I will admit also that I haven't seen a VHS movie since the second one, so I think it's been almost 10 years. So take that into consideration, of course, but I do think that it's a good idea to abandon the framing device of some people stumbling on VHS tapes in a weird abandoned house. In this movie here, there is just like literally little toy soldiers making out, and I think it's way better. It's more interesting. In VHS 99, I liked only 2 of the short films, and the other ones were missed opportunities in my opinion, either for reasons of CGI or for reasons of just bad writing at the end of the day. I really enjoyed Ozzy's Dungeon, mostly because of Stephen Ogg, who is such an incredible actor, and also because at the end of the day it turns into a weird cosmic horror nightmare, and you know that I love that shit. And the other one I enjoyed is called To Hell and Back, and this made me realize that there are not that many horror films which take place in the middle of nowhere, in a canyon for example, at night, and those landscapes tend to look so incredibly good. The next one is yet another international horror film. It's Spanish, it's called Piggy. Of course my expectations were actually quite high, just because if you just look at the poster and the trailer of the movie, you know what I mean. It reminded me of other films like Alexandre Aja's movie Haute Tension. It reminded me of other French horror films like Grave, and a little bit of like a Spit on Your Grave and that kind of like weird subgenres that focuses on women's abuse and how they try to reclaim their identity, try to reclaim their body.
Me llaman cerda. Oink, oink, oink. Por eso no bajo y tú no haces nada. Por favor.
And this movie here made me realize also that we don't have any final girl slash hero who is played by a plus size woman or even man when I think about it. So I was really excited about this film here, but at the end of the day, even though it is interesting, it takes way too much time to actually commit to the genre itself, because here we are in a weird kind of slasher genre and we kind of get to the good part only in the last 10 minutes. Most of the film itself is actually like a weird, not even psychological drama, like a weird social drama. We see some interesting things when it comes to the Spanish community being at each other's throats because their daughters have disappeared, and I like that, but at the end of the day nothing really comes of it and it's a bit disappointing. I also didn't like the fact that the villain of the story, it's not really the bullies themselves, so the people who have abused our main character, but it is this weird guy who doesn't talk much, and he seems to remind me a lot of Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He's a brute, he tortures people, he kidnaps people, he does really weird things, and he doesn't seem to have a lot of motivations when it comes to what he's doing. So it felt like the movie was saying, oh, you know, all of these stories when it comes to abuse, they're not enough to keep us entertained, we have to include something else, and they included this character here who didn't really belong in such a grounded story about abuse and about bullying. I mean, I still enjoyed this film at the end of the day, I'm just saying that it's not perfect, and I feel like this movie here really showcased the talent talent of the director and the main actress, so Carlota Pereda and Laura Galan, and I think these two talents should really not be underestimated for the next few years. Do you remember that Rick and Morty episode about the existential space fart cloud? Well, this movie is exactly that.
I wonder why Greg is always so critical of my girlfriend.
Well, he'd probably like to have me to himself. That's how friends are.
Or does he want her to himself? The world can be one together, cosmos without hatred.
This movie is called Glorious. It's a weird concept of a guy stopping in the middle of the woods, deciding to go to the bathroom and being locked inside by a weird Lovecraftian demon who asks him to do a favor.
Your feelings tear you up inside, pure and raw. That's what I need from you.
What did you do, Wes?
It's interesting, it's not very action-packed, there is a lot of talking and sometimes actually the dialogues, they feel a bit stiff. It kind of reminds me of the types of script that a young filmmaker in film school would write. They don't really sound very genuine and very natural, and they don't sound like people talk in everyday life. But at the end of the day, when it comes to the gore, the practical effects, and the concept of the movie itself, it is really, really cool. And if you give me cosmic horror, I will love it. It doesn't really matter whether it's good or not. I feel like cosmic horror is one of those subgenres that has a lot of potential and it's really hard to mess up, especially if you rely on weird tentacle violence. And this movie really does.
Hey, get a room, guys. Whoa! Hey, Fred. Hey, Fred. Oh, that's not right. No.
My last review for the video is gonna be about Disney Marvel Werewolf by Night, which was one of my favorite Marvel projects that I've seen probably since Guardians of the Galaxy, especially if we're talking about originality.
Death is coming for you!
It's really good. I love the black and white aspect and the entire cinematography of this. 50 minutes was actually a really good length for this kind of story here, and I kind of want Disney Marvel to commit to those kind of movie specials way more often. I can think of so many projects which would have been way more interesting under this weird kind of movie slash TV special structure. Falcon and the Winter Soldier for once, I don't think there is enough story to go on for an entire series, and even Aoki at the end of the day, it would have been a really interesting special. Moon Knight, I think it would have deserved to be a movie instead of a TV series, especially when it comes to the budget. There's a lot of things to set up, it couldn't have been a special. But when it comes to Werewolf by Night, I love the production design, all the different costumes, the kind of vibes from the 40s, kind of reminding us of the classic Universal creatures like the Creature of the Black Lagoon, like the Mummy, like the Invisible Man, those kind of things. And honestly, this was the first time in a long time that I actually enjoyed the humor within it. There is a couple of jokes, and of course this is Michael Giacchino's directorial debut. He's an incredibly prolific composer, and here he really showed that he actually is a good director as well.
I remember growing up, the only way I looked at a monster was, I feel so bad for that thing. I felt so bad for these monsters. Felt so bad for King Kong, for Godzilla, for Frankenstein's monster. All of these. They didn't ask for this, you know? They didn't ask, they just are who they are.
Everything about this film is good when it comes to the soundtrack, when it comes to the action sequences as well. And he actually managed to have a lot of blood just because of the black and white aspect so that it wouldn't be R-rated. And there is a specific scene which is entirely shot through a long take where the werewolf is actually killing a lot of people, which was breathtaking. I just had a really good time when it comes to Werewolf by Night. And it's without a doubt one of my favorite movies of the year.
He's fucking wolf, ain't that a pity? Cause I'm fucking those bitches from Sex in the City.
He fucks the Sex and the City gals.
Now we're done with the big reviews, and as I did in my other videos, so the summer, spring and Halloween at the movies videos that I've started a couple of years ago, I will give you a couple of quick recommendations to wrap this video up. and I will divide them into 3 categories: movies that you should definitely avoid, movies that maybe you will enjoy, and movie that you should definitely check out. When it comes to the movies that you should definitely avoid, I really don't recommend The Visitor, Kicking Blood, and The Changed. The Changed is one of the worst movies that I've seen this year. I have no idea how they actually managed to get such a horror icon with such an incredibly badly written script. Kicking Blood is yet another weird vampire movie that tries to reinvent things, but besides the cinematography, there is literally like nothing interesting about it.
They scream. They cry, they fight. I never understood it.
And The Visitor is just boring. It's just so incredibly boring. I don't even think I managed to finish it. When it comes to my maybe category, we can find here Hellbender, Speak No Evil, and Grim Cutty. Here we have films that are not necessarily perfect, but just because they have an interesting concept, they might be worth your time if you manage your expectations. For example, when it comes to Hellbender, I really enjoyed all the witchy vibes, but at the end of the day you could really feel that it was a micro-budget movie, and it really showed with the performances of the secondary characters, which were just abysmal, and it was impossible to take this movie seriously. When it comes to Speak No Evil, it's actually a really strong film if you consider it as a drama and not if you consider it as a horror film, especially because I feel like it never gets creepy enough to be upsetting like other A24 movies. If you think about Lamb, or if you think about Midsommar, where you have communities which are acting in such weird and odd ways that it keeps your eyes on the TV and you can't look away. This movie kind of relies a lot on the plot twist as well, and you don't really know what's happening until it's too late, but I feel like the journey is not necessarily worth it, especially if you have high expectations.
No one's forcing you to stay, but I really hope you do, because today is gonna be a great day.
And when it comes to Grim Cutty, it is starring one of the weirdest puppets I've ever seen. The monster itself is not scary, but I did like the concept itself and the idea of parents kind of like the more they get anxious, the more power they give to this creature here, which will eventually kill their children. I feel like it's a really interesting concept, and I think it was actually well handled at the end of the day, even though it was not scary at all. The creature actually reminded me of a weird Sesame Street character, and it's definitely not a compliment. For the fuck yeah recommendations of this video, I will tell you to watch Resurrection, and I will tell you to watch The Sadness. The Sadness if you want to have an incredible fun gore fest. And Resurrection if you want to see once again a really strong performance like the one in The Night House from last year, and if you want a slow burn horror, because at the end of the day this is a real slow burn, and if you go in expecting something action-packed, I feel like you'll be disappointed, but it's definitely worth it just because of the mood of the film itself and the performances, which are just amazing.
No, what time is it? It's time to get fucked. No, fuck me. Fuck me.
Anyways, those are all the recommendations that I had for this Halloween season. I hope that you have a good Halloween night and that you watch a lot of horror films, or that you go trick-or-treating. It depends what you want to do, you know? Let me know down in the comments what you're doing for this Halloween. Personally, I'll probably be watching a movie. Yeah, because that's what I enjoy doing at the end of the day. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Every single like that you drop will go to horror indie directors, because we've had actually a lot of really strong horror films this year, and it's thanks to them. Probably this is the first year where the best horror films are not only distributed by A24, so we should applaud them. Am I right? I'm Patrick, and this is Torn Apart.
On Wild Cameras Catch It All, you won't believe how far these girls are willing to go.
You're 18, right?
Yes, sir. Woo! I want to be popular.
Da 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 da. Da 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 da.